The collapse didn't begin with tanks or missiles or protests. It began with a number. In 2018, $1 cost 70,000 Rials. Today it costs nearly 1.5 million. That is not depreciation. That is annihilation. When a currency collapses this fast, money stops being money. It becomes noise, a rumor, a countdown. Hyperinflation above 40% doesn't just raise prices. It destroys time. You cannot plan. You cannot save. You cannot trust tomorrow. Rice turns into a luxury. Imported goods vanish from ordinary life. The middle class is erased quietly, not by force, but by arithmetic. This is not just Iran's problem, because when a state can no longer price reality, it cannot govern reality either. If you want analysis that goes beyond headlines, stay with me, subscribe, because what you are about to hear is not a local crisis. It is a system breaking in real time. And before we talk about blame or geopolitics or ideology, we need to define the problem itself. Before we talk about collapse, we need to name what is actually collapsing. This is not a single crisis, not inflation alone, not unemployment, not sanctions. It is a systemic failure where monetary policy, labor markets, institutions, and trust are breaking at the same time. The currency is failing, so prices no longer signal value. The labor market is failing, so education no longer guarantees dignity. Institutions are failing, so rules no longer apply equally. And when all three fail together, a society enters a different phase. People stop thinking long term, they stop investing. They stop believing effort will be rewarded. What replaces that belief is survival logic, short horizons, risky behavior, parallel systems. This is the pivot point. The moment an economy stops functioning as an economy and starts functioning as a coping mechanism, to understand how Iran reached this point, we have to rewind, not years, decades, because this collapse was engineered slowly, long before it accelerated suddenly. This story did not start with collapse. It started with dependence. For decades, the economy was built around a single engine: oil, abundant, powerful, and dangerously simple. When oil revenues flowed, structural weaknesses were masked, subsidies expanded, the state grew, efficiency was postponed. But dependency creates fragility. When access to markets narrowed, when sanctions tightened, when prices fluctuated, the entire system felt it at once. To compensate, the state leaned on the central bank. Deficits widened, money was printed, liquidity surged without production to match it. That decision changed everything. More currency chased fewer goods, prices detached from wages. Inflation became permanent, not cyclical. At the same time, demographic pressure intensified. A young, educated population entered a labor market that was already shrinking. What should have been an engine of growth became a reservoir of frustration. This is how slow erosion works. Not dramatic, not sudden, until one day pressure reaches a threshold and the system snaps. That snap is where the first real crisis appears. Then the abstract became personal. Prices stopped rising monthly. They began rising daily. Rice did not become expensive. It became unreachable. A bag that once cost 100,000 Rials jumped to nearly 2 million. Not because supply vanished, but because money lost meaning faster than shelves could empty. Wages didn't fall, they froze, and inflation ran straight past them. Most workers earned between 40 and 60 million Rials a month. On paper, that looked stable. In reality, it translated to $30 or $40. Rent absorbed everything. Food competed with medicine. Savings disappeared first. This was the first visible rupture. The moment survival replaced aspiration. If this kind of analysis helps you see patterns others miss, stay with me. Subscribe. Because this crisis is not random. It is mechanical. And once pricing breaks, people search for alternatives. Not reforms, not patience, but escape routes. That search is what created the system hiding beneath the surface. When the official economy stops working, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. What replaced it was not chaos, but a parallel system, informal, illegal, and often protected from above. Smuggling was no longer criminal behavior. It became economic logic. Subsidized gasoline crossed borders. Medicine moved through back channels. Baby formula followed the same routes as electronics. This shadow economy wasn't marginal. It was worth billions of dollars each year. And it wasn't run by the desperate alone. Powerful networks embedded inside the state controlled access, protection, and profit. Those closest to authority benefited most from dysfunction. Official exchange rates became fiction. Real value was set elsewhere in cash markets, back alleys, and whispered numbers. The middle class was trapped, too poor to exploit the system, too visible to escape it. This is the hidden mechanism of collapse, when disorder rewards insiders and punishes everyone else. But every parallel system has limits, and the next stress test did not come from money, it came from energy. To escape financial isolation, the system turned to electricity. Cheap, subsidized, abundant, at least on paper, cryptocurrency mining was legalized, not as innovation, but as conversion, energy into money, silently, digitally, off the books. By 2025, crypto transactions crossed $1 billion. Mining facilities multiplied, warehouses glowed through the night, but power grids don't care about strategy. They obey physics. Mining began consuming nearly 8% of national electricity. Cities went dark, factories stalled, homes lost power. Mashhad experienced outages lasting days, not because of war, but because servers never slept. Once again, access was unequal. State-linked actors mined freely. Ordinary citizens paid the price. This was the second rupture, a system cannibalizing itself to survive. Energy stability sacrificed for financial bypass, short-term relief, long-term collapse. And when lights go out, people don't blame algorithms. They blame authority, which is when economic failure turns into social anger. And that anger does not stay contained. At some point, this stops being about systems. It becomes about you, about standing in a store, doing math you never learned in school, choosing between food and medicine, between rent and dignity. If you are young, education no longer protects you. 1 in 3 cannot find work. If you are a woman, the door is often closed before you even knock. Your salary exists, but its value evaporates before the month ends. 40 million Rials, 60 million, numbers that sound large until they buy almost nothing. You watch savings disappear, not through mistakes, but through time, and something deeper breaks. The belief that effort matters, that patience is rewarded, that tomorrow will be better than today. If this story feels distant, don't look away, because millions are already living what many societies assume can't happen. If you want to understand how economic pressure turns into something far more dangerous, stay with me. Share this, because awareness is not sympathy, it's preparation. And when personal despair reaches scale, it doesn't remain personal. It spills outward, across borders, across markets, across politics. That is where the global consequences begin. When a state weakens internally, it rarely collapses inward alone. The shock travels, oil does not disappear, but it reroutes, almost entirely to one buyer, at a discount, with no leverage. Production holds near 3.2 million barrels per day, yet revenue shrinks, because sanctions bend trade into shadows and choice into dependency. When prices dip below budget thresholds, the damage multiplies. Infrastructure stalls, spending narrows, priorities harden, money flows outward instead, into regional influence, into proxies, into deterrence. This is how domestic collapse exports instability. Smuggling networks stretch across borders. Energy stress ripples through neighbors. Migration pressure rises quietly, and major powers watch closely. Because a failing state is unpredictable. It does not negotiate from confidence. It postures from insecurity. Markets respond to uncertainty faster than diplomats. Insurance premiums rise. Shipping routes recalibrate. Risk is repriced globally. What began as inflation has now become geopolitics. And the world is left asking the most dangerous question of all. What comes next? Because systems under this much strain do not glide forward. They break or transform. And the future now splits into three paths. There are only three directions this can go. None of them are comfortable. The first is managed survival. Inflation remains high but stabilizes. The system limps forward. Negotiations soften pressure without resolving structure. Life becomes smaller, poorer, but predictable. This is the best case scenario, not recovery, but endurance. The second path is prolonged decay. Banks fail one by one. Capital keeps leaving. Public services hollow out. The state survives, but society fractures. This is where corruption hardens, where inequality becomes permanent, where hope exits quietly. The third path is collapse. Rapid, chaotic, uncontrolled. Institutions fail faster than repression can contain. Security fractures internally. Economic logic disappears entirely. History shows that systems rarely choose wisely under stress. They drift toward the path that preserves power, not stability. And when elites begin moving their money out, it signals something profound. They are not planning reform, they are planning escape, which leaves one final question, not about economics, not about sanctions, but about time. How long can a system survive after its own insiders stop believing in it? That question brings us to the end. This collapse is not sudden, and it is not accidental. It is the result of choices, repeated, defended, and insulated from consequence. Hyperinflation did not destroy the system alone, neither did sanctions nor protest. What broke it was the refusal to adapt while pretending resilience was strength. Every system has a moment when momentum replaces control. Iran is past that moment. What remains is uncertainty, not only for its people, but for a region already stretched thin. And this is why this story matters to you, because economic collapse does not stay contained. It migrates, it radicalizes, it destabilizes neighbors who assume distance is protection. If you want to understand how systems fail before they reach the breaking point, follow this channel, share this analysis, because the next collapse will not announce itself politely. And in the next video, we will examine what happens when pressure turns into rupture, and whether collapse always leads to chaos, or sometimes to something new.